Hi, well, thank you. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. I'm delighted that so many of you have chosen to come along and find out more about the Cambridge Primary and Lower Secondary Digital Literacy Curriculum. During today's session, I hope to provide you with a range of information about the curriculum. Therefore, I hope that the content will be of interest to both those of you that are already delivering digital literacy to your learners, but also to those that are simply here to build up a basic understanding of what the curriculum contains, i.e. those that are new to the digital literacy curriculum. As part of my description, I will be looking at what we actually mean by the term digital literacy, because if you were to search for the term on the web, you would find a range of very different and quite specific definitions. I want to then support my own definition by sharing some teaching activities from our primary and lower secondary schemes of work. And I'll be including activities that can be used both face-to-face with learners or during remote teaching sessions, or that can be used to both support and enhance the learners' experiences within their lessons from other subjects. So ideal for those of you who are maybe not teaching digital literacy as a distinct subject at the moment, hopefully give you one or two pointers about how you can use the content elsewhere. I also hope to provide you with one or two ideas, I should say, to support teachers so that they can become increasingly digitally literate themselves. For example, when they are delivering lessons using digital tools, and that could be within the classroom or across online platforms such as those that you may have used if you have delivered any lessons remotely over the past 12 months. So let me start by introducing myself. My name is Lloyd. I'm a Curriculum Development Manager working in the Curriculum Programmes team here at Cambridge International. I've worked on a range of computing and IT related subjects, including digital literacy over the past few years. And I've also worked on our primary and lower secondary digital art and design curriculum. When I say worked on, I mean that I have helped shape the curriculum content, obviously working with particular subject experts, and have managed the development of all of the support materials that are available for you to download for these subjects on the Cambridge Primary and Lower Secondary support sites. As I say, I'm going to share examples of teaching activities later on from the schemes of work, and important thing to say is that all of those documents, all of the documents I refer to, because they will be next to impossible to read on the screen, are downloadable from those support sites. Okay, but before I start, so that I can get to know you a little better, please can I ask you to respond by voting yes or no to the question that's displayed on the screen, i.e. do you currently deliver any Cambridge or primary or lower secondary in your school? So I've got certainly a good few of you who do deliver primary and lower secondary at the moment. Just waiting for a few more responses to come through. Okay, so I can move on. It is looking that about 80% of you do deliver Cambridge Primary and Lower Secondary. Okay. For those of you that are new to primary and lower secondary, however, I should explain that it currently consists of 10 subjects that run from stage 1, i.e. for those learners that are age 5, up to stage 9, from which point the learners will then progress into their first year of their IGCSE studies. I should also acknowledge that the primary and lower secondary digital literacy curriculum, although it is part of the Cambridge pathway that's now displayed on the screen, does not progress into a specific IGCSE or A-level. It is instead intended to be an enabling curriculum that will allow learners to apply the skills that they acquire to all of their later studies, regardless of which subjects they take. And when I start talking about the skills later on, hopefully you'll begin to understand what I mean when I say that. Okay, but going back to the previous question, please can I ask now, for those of you that did say you're taking, are delivering digital literacy, delivering primary and lower secondary, whether you also deliver digital literacy?
So the poll should be on the screen for you to respond to if you've not yet responded. We'll give it a few more moments and then we'll share the responses with everyone.
Okay, the responses are coming through, and it's looking at about 60% of you are not delivering digital literacy at the moment, with obviously about 40% of the respondents that are. But as I say, it has no bearing on what we do today, but just helps me decide where to focus my attention during the presentation. Okay. As digital literacy does not progress to any specific IGCSEs, and because it is not assessed for a primary or lower secondary checkpoint, we have attempted to make the means of delivery as flexible as possible. So those of you that also deliver Cambridge primary or lower secondary global perspectives may also be familiar with this flexibility from your experiences of that subject. Within the digital literacy schemes of work, we provide both structured lesson activities, which would be suitable for regular timetabled lessons, but we also provide projects that are based upon the content of each teaching unit. These projects can either be used at the end of the teaching unit to consolidate the learning, or as a starting point for embedding the teaching of the content into your other lessons, or to simply pick out the content that you feel is most relevant to your learners. Therefore, for those of you that have indicated that you do not deliver digital literacy, please can I ask you to, or that you do deliver digital literacy, sorry, please can I ask you to select from the following options. Do you do it as a specific weekly or bi-weekly timetabled lesson? Do you do it by embedding digital literacy into your teaching of other subjects, or do you tend to pick out certain content areas?
So again, you should see the poll on the middle of the screen. It should be just above that status icon that I mentioned earlier. If for whatever reason that's not working or you can't access it, then do just put the number of the option that you use in the chat as well. Thank you.
Okay. Again, it's a fairly even spread there between the three, with as part of a regular timetable lesson and by selecting particular content areas, slightly coming out ahead of the middle options. That's really interesting to know. I am going to look at specific content areas as we move on. So hopefully there'll be some food for thought as we progress. Okay, I'm going to start by looking at why it is that we all need to be increasingly digitally literate. Personally, I've encountered so many new tools over the past 12 months, as it has seemed that everybody that I'm collaborating with wants to use a completely different digital platform to everybody else. And I should say that I've been working remotely from home for since March last year, so 13 months now. As I go through the presentation, I'm going to talk about things like stress, anxiety, and well-being in more detail later on, because in my opinion, the management of these are important skills for digitally literate people, regardless of their age or their experience. However, the first thing that I needed to rationalize for myself when I started working from home was that my working experience was about to change and that technology was going to play a key part in my ability to continue doing my job. Based on the quote that is now displayed on the screen from one of my Cambridge International colleagues, I can only assume that my experience of needing to familiarise myself with a new range of digital tools was similar to that experienced by everybody else that has delivered lessons in a remote environment over the past 12 months. This leads me into the first introduction I'm going to make to the content of the digital literacy curriculum, where parallels can be drawn between Julia's observation of remote teaching and the learning objective that is now displayed on the screen. This learning objective is taken from the stage 4 of the primary curriculum. With hindsight, I would probably now add an increased layer of depth to this learning objective by replacing the words has changed with is constantly changing. I say that because it doesn't take too much imagination to envisage my working situation in a year from now, where I will be communicating using digital tools that I'm not even aware of as we speak today. In fact, the platform that we are using today is an entirely new one to me. So do please bear with me if I'm presenting myself as a poor example of somebody who claims to be digitally literate. I'm now going to introduce another learning objective from the digital literacy curriculum, this time from lower secondary. This objective reads, describe how digital technology is changing the workplace. I'd like to ask you to take a moment to imagine what teaching and learning would have been like during the COVID pandemic if this advent of technology were not already underway. I guess the most fundamental of questions is whether education would even have been able to continue in an effective form. I guess that the best case scenario would have been that schools would have had a series of logistical nightmares that included high telephone and high postage costs. Within the Cambridge Digital Literacy curriculum, we describe technology as being disruptive. In English, disruptive is a word that is generally associated with problems such as the chaos that is caused when a number of flights are cancelled or when a road traffic accident leads to long queues. The COVID pandemic obviously could certainly be described as being disruptive. However, within digital literacy, we are keen to stress that disruption can be both a negative and a positive thing. And it is often about how individual users of technology respond to that disruption, which dictates whether the impact on either themselves or on their workplace or on their industry is either a good or a bad thing. To explain this disruption a little further, our curriculum aims to support learners to understand what was happening in classrooms, in offices, and in other workplaces during recent history. We only need to go back, say, 20 or 30 years to a world where workers were still very reliant upon pen, paper, physical postal systems, and face-to-face interaction for all aspects of their working lives. There are many that would say, obviously, that things were better then and that there was certainly less risk. But I think it is important to strike a balance between respecting what has worked well in the past and certainly respecting the value of face-to-face interaction in a range of scenarios, including obviously those that take place in the classroom, and embracing technology because it enables us to innovate and to achieve efficiencies and to respond to the more negative forms of disruption, i.e. the COVID pandemic. One of the key things to understand is that the disruption that is caused by technology often relates to factors such as efficiency that we were not even aware of until we were able to explore and understand the new tools that we were being given to work with. This summary of the disruption that is caused by digital technology and of how the population are prepared for it can be illustrated from this quote from Henry Ford when he was discussing the potential of his own customer customer base, i.e. that for the motor car, to visualize what it was that he was about to sell them. I wonder if this quote would be equally valid if it read, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said pens that do not leak or run dry. As well as reflecting on technology's role in enabling schools to deliver remote lessons during this pandemic, it is also worth acknowledging the fact that so many of you have been able to join this session today. I'm not sure that so many of you would have been able to attend if you needed to travel to Cambridge or to some other location for a face-to-face event. Therefore, it cannot be denied that digital technology has provided many benefits we are now becoming increasingly reliant upon. However, one of the key aspects of being digitally literate is to acknowledge that just because a piece of technology is new and is fresh, it may not be something that we as individuals feel comfortable working with. And because technology is now evolving at such a pace, we are constantly being provided with new tools to use. This therefore creates a problem for us in terms of being able to keep up, and for our customers, which in this case obviously your learners, to be able to maintain the same pace as evolution that we are expecting from ourselves. I therefore also want to use this workshop to explain how we are using the Cambridge primary and lower secondary digital literacy curriculum to prepare learners for their own digital future by helping them to understand that the technology that they are using today will not be the technology that they will be using throughout their working lives. I also think it worthwhile to acknowledge that while we are all learners when it comes to acknowledge that we are all learners when it comes to using technology. The phrase digital natives has been applied to young people who are growing up in a world where technology has always been present. And whether you agree with that term or not, it cannot be denied that we as adults have just as much to learn about what technology can do and how we should use it both productively and responsibly as those that we are teaching. I therefore want to provide an opportunity today for you to reflect on some of the curriculum content and to consider whether there is any learning that you can apply to either yourselves or to other adults that will support you in using digital tools in the classroom or in delivering lessons remotely. But before I start, I'd like to consider what does it mean to be digitally literate. So I'm going to ask you to cast your votes again. A series of possible definitions are now displayed on the screen, and I would like to ask you to each take a moment to select the possibility that you feel best meets your understanding of the term. Are we able to display the poll? Thank you. I don't think you guys can see the responses as they are coming in, but there's a clear favourite here for option 5, which is to be able to communicate and collaborate and innovate using technology, which is really interesting. And I would argue that it's a good response based on the fact that in order to be able to communicate, collaborate, and innovate, you need to be able to do all of the options that sit above it anyway. So to be able to do many of the things that are described here, such as use software packages proficiently or to be able to innovate using technology, also requires time to experiment and to tinker with the tools that are available. And time is obviously a luxury that many of us do not have. I would therefore argue that alongside the definitions that we've shared, that another aspect to being digitally literate is the ability to rationalize your own expectations and the expectations of others when it comes to using digital tools. Being able to rationalize in this way and say, and say, no, I need time to get used to this, is surely a good skill to have when it comes to protecting your own digital well-being. However, the Cambridge Digital Literacy curriculum aims to be an enabling curriculum that supports learners to become the digital leaders of tomorrow. We want them to have the confidence when they are using digital tools, not just by using those tools in a prescribed manner, but also by developing the confidence to play and to experiment in order to produce work that is both vibrant and excites both the audience and the learners themselves whilst they are producing that work. Regardless of their age, many of today's learners are also engaging in online spaces. Younger learners are likely to be doing this passively by selecting and watching videos on sharing platforms, for example, while those that are approaching their teenage years are likely to be thinking about their social media profiles and are likely to be coming under increasing internal and external pressure to increase their online presence. It is therefore important that learners of all ages are supported to protect their own well-being and that of those that they come into contact with, but they should also be supported to make responsible decisions of their own. It's only through making those responsible decisions now and feeling supported when doing so that young people will be able to prepare themselves to be digitally resilient during adulthood. I should also say here that the digital literacy curriculum does not attempt to be a technical guide for using software tools such as Microsoft Word or any particular email or social media platform. The focus is very much upon equipping learners to respond to new technologies and new experiences wherever they encounter them. The curriculum content is split into 3 content strands as are displayed on the screen. These are tools and content creation, safety and well-being, and the digital world. And I'm now going to take a moment to explain each of these individually. The tools and content creation strand is where learners equip themselves to respond proficiently, creatively, and innovatively to the tools that they have available to them. These tools could be document creation software, such as that used for text presentation or for producing visual presentations. It could be research tools, such as the World Wide Web, or it could be technical tools that will enable learners to create videos, animations, and sound recordings. The safety and well-being strand supports learners to understand the risks and the responsibilities that they have through being an active digital citizen. None of these risks or responsibilities are presented as being rules, however, because ultimately we want learners to feel equipped and empowered to make their own choices about what they do and how they respond when they encounter to what they encounter when they're using their digital devices. Key to this is encouragement for learners to stop and to think about the potential implications of each online action. And particularly for younger learners, we want them to know that the best course of action, if they see anything that they don't like online, be it something simple like an unexpected pop-up, that they see what they're doing, they step away from the screen, they raise their hands and they ask a responsible adult to come and help them. Finally, the digital world strand supports learners to understand their place within the global community and to understand that this global community can only exist through the use of interconnected technology. Learners will consider a range of environments, including those that might be local to them in a physical sense, but not in line with their own experiences, such as certain workplaces. In this strand, learners will also consider global connectivity and the advantages of this, and will be supported to acknowledge that, for a range of reasons, the access to technology that many take for granted is not afforded to all. So based on the 3 content strands, and this question is particularly relevant to those of you who have indicated that you tend to pick out content that you feel is relevant to your learners, please could I ask you to respond to which of the content areas you feel is most relevant to your learners? Okay, it's a fairly even spread there between the three, with tools and content creation and the digital world just kind of nudging ahead of safety and well-being being slightly, but the numbers are very, very close, which is interesting in terms of the balance of the curriculum. And I should stress, within the schemes of work, these strands are very much co-taught with each other. I'm now going to very quickly run through some teaching activities that are suggested within the digital literacy schemes of work. I will do this to help you understand the curriculum content and to possibly consider ways that these activities can be applied to your learners, and possibly even to adults such as yourselves, when considering that it is inevitable that you need to prepare yourselves to encounter new digital experiences in the future. So on this slide, you'll see in the top, on the right hand side, a screenshot taken from one of our schemes of work. Obviously, I don't expect you to be able to read that document given the size of the print. I just wanted to include it there so you could see the detail for this one single activity that appears in the schemes of work. Typically, within each scheme of work, each learning objective will be covered at least 2 or 3 times within the detail that you see on the screen. Okay, but the first of these activities is taken from stage 2. So obviously the learners are quite young. However, much of the content could be delivered to learners of any age, including adults, albeit within a different context and with different technical requirements. Generally speaking, the stage at which a learning objective is present within the curriculum is largely determined by the earliest point at which learners should be developing their awareness of that particular content area. However, there is no reason why the key learning messages from this video recording activity could not also be considered by an adult who is preparing for a new online presence, such as a teacher who is delivering a live video lesson for the first time. In that particular scenario, the teacher could use this activity as a checklist to make sure that they are positioned correctly on the screen and in relation to any other props that they want their learners to focus on, and also to make sure that they are positioned well in relation to their microphone. In this next activity from stage 5, learners are given context to help them understand the risks and benefits that are associated with instant messaging. Learners may already be using instant messaging within school and to converse with their friends, but as they get older, we want to support and encourage them to pause and to take responsibility for the messages that they post and for who they post those messages to. This will include being selective over which messages they receive that they then choose to respond to. It's all about creating a space to think through the implications of each message that we send, and it's something that we should all be doing, as social media posts that we make as adults could be forwarded to a wider audience, misinterpreted by certain recipients, or invite interaction with unintended audiences. As social media messages can also be revisited at a later date, it is important that all of us not only post things that we feel confident won't have a negative impact on our reputations or on our mental well-being in the future. We talk about the digital footprint quite a lot in the digital literacy curriculum documents, and the messages we post are a key aspect to creating our own individual footprints. Moving on to the next slide, given that we use so many software tools and are regularly encouraged to use so many more, we are never going to know everything about each one and are never going to know how to fix each problem that we encounter, particularly when we're in pressurized situations. One of the real benefits of the global community, however, is that there is always somebody else who has encountered the same problem, has found a way to fix it, and thankfully has written an online guide or produced a YouTube video that explains the problem and its solution. Therefore, another key tool for a digitally literate individual is knowing that these sources of help are available and knowing how to find them. In this particular stage 6 activity, learners will be discovering how to solve problems with the text processing software that they are using. But as an adult, I have personal experience of using a similar approach when wanting to do new things with spreadsheets and when solving problems during live meetings, such as, for example, being able to give another participant the control of my screen. In this next stage 6 activity, we again encourage learners to consider their well-being before they enter into a specific piece of digital interaction. In this particular example, we ask them to consider the images that well-known celebrities post of themselves on their carefully curated, and we stress that, carefully curated social media feeds. We want to support learners to realise that they should not be comparing themselves to somebody who appears to be coping well with modern life. They will do this by accepting that the images that the celebrities post often do not reflect the reality of how they were feeling on the day that the image was taken. There are a number of similarities that can be identified between this awareness and other learner experiences, like those within the classroom. For example, if they try to compare their own work with that of another learner who appears to be doing well. This same learning could also be considered by an adult, including a teacher who hears from a colleague about all the great things that they are doing with online teaching tools. I think the key realization is just because another person is claiming that this works for them, it doesn't mean that I should feel pressured or you should feel pressured into taking the same approach or into using the same tool. It is important that we all have the freedom to select what works best for us, what we feel will present us in the best possible light, and what will best support us to cope both before and after we have engaged in a digital or other activity. In this activity that's now displayed on the screen, learners consider how much time they and others spend using digital devices each day. And I think I've seen this reflected in some of the comments that have come up. It is important that learners are encouraged and supported to regulate their screen time. It should also be acknowledged that there will be a temptation during remote learning activities for teachers to keep their learners engaged throughout the whole school day. However, it should be acknowledged that this runs the risk of learners spending too much of this school day staring at their screen, essentially. Therefore, in remote or other digital learning scenarios, a balance still needs to be maintained between screen time and other learning activities. From the teacher's perspective, creating time for learners to be away from the screen and by producing art or written outputs also allows time for the teacher themselves to step away from the live lesson and hopefully away from their computer screen. In this activity itself, in this teaching activity, I should stress that we ask learners to consider what we would call the opportunity cost in terms of an economic term, in terms of what they're not doing by spending the time on the screen, thinking about time face-to-face with friends, sporting activities they could be doing. Moving on from the consideration of screen time, however, it's also important to consider which tool to use for each activity and to identify opportunities to vary these tools. A digitally literate learner will not be one who becomes an expert in using a limited range of tools. A learner that has limited experience will not be able to make effective selections about which tool to use for a given scenario and will not be able to adapt their wide-ranging knowledge and skills to the new tools that they encounter in the future. In the final slide from this section, I present an activity where learners consider the digital divide. In my opinion, there is not just one single digital divide. Digital divides could exist across regional lines, economic lines, demographic lines, or even be caused by personal preference. In the teaching activity itself, learners are asked, what do you think causes a digital divide? And are supported to conclude that there is no single answer to this. The question of the digital divide is one that teachers could also consider in relation to their learners. For example, by considering what are the reasons that some learners may be better prepared to use technology to learn in the classroom or at home than other learners. Teachers may also like to consider whether a divide exists between parents. For example, there may be different expectations that could be a contributor to both the divide across learners and their requirements for home learning. Some parents might consider themselves to be digitally excellent, but may need to be supported to understand the perspective of the digital learning scenario. It's also worth considering here what teachers can do to support parents in a remote and home learning scenario. For example, by considering the needs of those parents who are working full-time from home, whilst also facilitating the school day of possibly one or more child. Having been through this myself, I know that I very much appreciated being able to plan my own child's day on the preceding evening so that I could identify times when my support was going to be particularly needed, such as for activities outside of the home, and when I could be more certain that I was going to be able to focus on my own daily workload. Before I finish, I want to take an opportunity to look at the same set of activities again, but now to consider examples of how they can be applied or embedded within the teaching of other subjects, particularly obviously other Cambridge primary and lower secondary subjects. This will enable those of you who are not currently teaching digital literacy to identify opportunities for key digital knowledge to be brought into your regular teaching. So let's look again at the stage 2 activity where learners create a video of themselves talking. As well as needing to consider the framing of their shot during this activity, I would also ask whether it provides an opportunity for them to spend time away from the screen, such as by creating a piece of art and then displaying that piece of completed work and themselves on the screen as they explain their work to their classmates and possibly even to a wider audience. This activity could even be extended further by asking the learners to use persuasive language when presenting their art to their audience. Alternatively, learners could also consider the sound aspect of a video by recording themselves playing a piece of music that they have just learned, practiced, and refined during a music lesson activity. As part of, as the process, creative or otherwise, is important in subjects such as art and music, learners who are possibly slightly older than stage 2 could record their music and art making during the rehearsals, during their performance, and when experimenting with sounds and with brushstrokes. In the music and the art and design teaching guides, we refer to a portfolio, and these portfolios could include audio, video, or still life clips where learners call upon their digital skills to help them to create and to curate the content of their portfolios with the progression of their art or musical output. When considering the benefits and risks of instant online communication, learners can combine their learning with that from either English or English as a second language to practice writing instant messages, such as short messages where the focus could be on the brevity, using text speak and other methods of informal language. They could also experiment by writing with different intentions or using different writing structures and using particular grammar and language and different language depending on their audience. When working remotely, particularly when collaborating in groups, instant messaging could be a way of fostering effective and inclusive collaboration within the groups that are working together. But consideration would need to be given to whether there is a danger of learners losing sight of their social responsibility and of excluding or disparaging another member of their group. When considering online images of celebrities and the impact that these have on the self-esteem of the individuals that are viewing them, learners could apply their thinking to the images that they see during physical education lessons. A great way for learners to discover and to refine their techniques in a range of sporting and other movement activities would be to view images and videos of elite athletes in action. However, Learners need to be supported to develop a rational approach when looking at these images. They should be supported to understand that elite athletes have had many years of training and have demonstrated immense dedication to their particular sporting activity. Learners will also benefit from acknowledging that those athletes are all human beings who also suffer from losses of both form and of confidence. This comparison with sporting heroes could also provide a good opportunity to talk to learners about their own resilience, which in terms of digital literacy could relate to either how they bounce back from an unkind comment that they've seen about themselves online, or how they persevere when trying to achieve something with a particular digital tool. Again, resilience is a word that we use quite often within the digital literacy documents. There are countless other opportunities to embed digital literacy learning into other primary and lower secondary subjects. And as we've seen, some of you are doing this already. But to end with this particular example about the digital divide, I would like to give two particular examples of where these can be co-taught. The first of these is from the Stage 9 Global Perspectives Challenge titled Understanding Each Other, which is now being displayed on the screen. This challenge falls under the language and communication topic, with the whole concept of understanding each other and what makes us different being a key factor in the digital divide, particularly when it's the digital divide at a local level. Also, in English as a second language, Stage 9 learners can practice their speaking and listening skills by conducting role plays where they understand the impact of the digital divide on particular individuals. Also, as digital literacy is an enabling curriculum, English or English as a second language learners could also practice using future tenses when describing either how they will use or the impact of digital technologies in the future. Earlier in this workshop, we looked at definitions of what it means to be digitally literate, and on screen now is one of the more wide-ranging definitions that I have found during a quick search on the web. From the digital literacy activities that we've looked at today, I should stress that these are just a tiny snapshot of particular areas of the curriculum. But we've seen that digital literacy relates to our ability to use digital tools effectively and to experiment with those digital tools, to understand the benefits and risks of being online, and also the potential that technology gives us to communicate, to collaborate, and even to deliver education in a range of remote scenarios. We have looked at the emotion that is related to our use of digital tools. This includes the way we interact with each other and how we protect our own safety and well-being through guarding who we speak to, giving careful consideration to what we say and what we share in digital spaces, and through how we respond emotionally to some of the things that we see online. Finally, we've looked at the fact that having access to digital tools is a privilege. It is one without which our recent experiences of online teaching and learning are likely to have been far more difficult and far less effective. However, a key part of being digitally literate is understanding that there are many others in the world who don't have the same access as we have ourselves, be that due to a range of factors, including the economic, the geographic, or simply the individual will or aptitude to respond to a world that is becoming ever more digital. I therefore would like to say in conclusion that it is our role as educators to do all that we can to demystify digital tools, to take away the fear factor, and to support our learners to use them effectively and safely, and to acquire the skills and knowledge that will enable them to become effective digital citizens and hopefully digital innovators in the bright future that awaits them. So I'm going to end there, but if I can get a summary of the questions and maybe take the last 10 minutes just to answer some of those, if that's okay.
Sure, thank you very much, Lloyd. I'm sure everyone found that very useful. We've certainly seen some positive comments come through the chat. We have had a few questions about where participants can get the schemes of work for syllabus for digital literacy. I think a few people have responded, but it would be great to hear you just to clarify that for them.
Okay, they're available on the primary and lower secondary support site. So all centres that are registered for Cambridge Primary will have access to the primary support site, and as far as I'm aware, all Cambridge registered centres have access to the lower secondary site. But a key thing that I would like to say is that from within their school, from the school administrator, the person responsible for managing the relationship with Cambridge, get your individual logins as teachers, make use of these sites. There's a range of information. There's a separate page for each subject that includes the curriculum frameworks, the teacher guides, schemes of work, support documents that explain the progression across the stages. And for those primary and lower secondary subjects that are not assessed by an end of stage or end of phase Cambridge checkpoint, there's guidance about how you can assess your learners yourselves. So yeah, the support sites are key.
Great, thank you. Someone else has asked, is there a specific software provided or suggested in the scheme of work for students to play with?
That's a really, really good question, but deliberately there isn't. Because we all have access to different software, but I think the key thing is it's about being able to choose that for yourselves, because the bigger the range the learners use at this stage, the more adaptable they will become to use different software in the future. What I would say is that we certainly don't recommend that schools go out and spend money on a range of software packages. The curriculum content can be delivered using what we call open source software, i.e. that is free to download on from the web. So I would say use whatever text processing software you're using in school at the moment. Use whatever presentation software you're using in school at the moment. Try and vary that through using other open source software. And when it comes to talking about social media or video sharing platforms with your learners, talk to them, find out about what it is they're using, so that the experience can really relate. They can really relate to what you're telling them through their own experience. And you might find that talking about things such as that, you're dealing with new digital platforms once every two years, or because of the speed of progress.
Thanks, Lloyd. Sorry, excuse me there. So we've had a few questions relating to timetabling. One has asked, should we put digital literacy on the timetable? Another has suggested, which would you suggest more, timetable session or embedding?
I think that's down to sort of personal, or not personal, but the context within the school, because obviously a lot of the centres that take our primary and lower secondary curriculum are also bringing in aspects of local curriculums or other international curriculum. So it's really down to the time that's available. I think the best advice I can give is that we generally recommend that digital literacy is taught for an hour a week if the schools were teaching the whole curriculum. So I have to say, I think the best advice I could give is look at one of the schemes of work. It does provide enough activities to fill that 30 hours teaching time, and decide for yourselves whether that's something you can apply to the structure within your school.
Thank you. Someone else has asked whether you could explain more about the digital divide.
Okay, the digital divide, it's the difference between those that have access to technology and don't, but it could equally be, so that could be due to economic reasons, due to differences between those that live in, say, urban areas compared to those who live in rural areas where there's perhaps not access to the internet, for example. But it could also exist within a family. For example, there would be no point me talking to my dad about things that he sees online or does online, because it it just wasn't part of his world. You know, it's so it's about the difference between those that are digitally aware and make themselves a digitally aware, and those that don't. So the divide can be at lots of different levels. So it's a quite a vague description, but I think that's it needs to be that, because it's something that's constantly changing, and there isn't, as I said in the presentation, there isn't just the one digital divide.
So someone has also asked, most teachers are learning about digital technology by themselves. What advice would you give to teachers who are new to learning new technology?
Okay, collaborate with each other is a good one, because you can learn from each other's experiences, although not be daunted by those that tell you about all the brilliant things that they are doing. I mentioned in the presentation about looking for online sources. So I don't know, you want to do something in Word, you want to something that some people might consider to be quite basic, you want to do something in a text processing software, like put a table into a document. Go onto YouTube. How do I put a table into a text document using whichever software you're using? I'm fairly sure there'll be a video out there that walks you through how to do that. One other key thing you can do is engage with your learners. Talk to them about what they're doing. Allow them to demonstrate. Allow them to show off their knowledge. They'll be more than happy to do it, and they're probably using computers more than we would like them to. But let's tap into it. Let's learn from them. Let's learn from them.
Thanks, Lloyd. We've had a couple of questions around what is your opinion on assessing the knowledge gained in a digital literacy, and how can we assess digital literacy?
I don't think digital literacy is a subject that should be assessed formally, i.e. for an exam, a formal Cambridge exam, if you like. Because the content includes things like safety and well-being, I'm not and this is a personal opinion, I'm not sure how comfortable I am with telling a learner that they've passed, they're safe online, or even worse, no, you've not reached the standard at staying safe online. I think it could send out the wrong messages. I think it should be very much, you know, any activities around safety and well-being in the digital environment should really be just used to inform the next stage of the learning. Okay, this happened, this is where we need to step back, and this is what we need to do to put that right in the future, with hopefully one of the key messages being stop and think before you engage in this type of activity again. But in saying that, if you were to assess in the classroom, and I'm thinking of, you know, assessing the quality of, say, a video output, or assessing the quality of a piece of creative writing that a learner produces about their vision of the working world or the school world in 20 years from now, there is assessment guidance on the relevant digital literacy page within the primary and lower secondary support site. So it's well worth taking a look at that, because it provides pen portraits of learners, so the learners done this, and talks you through kind of how you would guide them and how you would kind of apply put them into sort of a marking category, if you like. Okay. Finally, on that, I would also say there's projects within the schemes of work which can be used in a number of ways, but one of those could be to assess your learners. So they take the unit of learning, and then independently or in groups, they complete the project that's described within the scheme of work, and that would provide a great amount of information about how much knowledge they've gained during the unit, and how well they're applying that, and obviously how well they've retained that knowledge.
Thank you. There's a kind of a question, I suppose, relating back to the timetabling again. The question is, can the digital literacy curriculum be made in simple workshops for learners or schools who cannot table the subject into their curriculum?
It can, and I think probably the project's a starting point for that, because the end of unit projects do encompass the output of the whole units, and each project should only take sort of 2 to 3 hours to deliver. Sure, the learners wouldn't have had the learning from the units, so the outputs probably, arguably wouldn't be as vibrant and as digitally innovative as they would be if the learners had gone through the units, so the learners are less likely to extend themselves. But those projects certainly do provide a structure around which isolated teaching could occur. Okay, and one of the things we kind of recommend throughout is where learners are using digital tools to create documents, why don't they create a document using those digital tools that presents their learning about how to stay safe online, how to recognize the risks of a stranger that they're conversing with online. So they're combining kind of two content areas in the one output and in the one activity.
Okay, and probably time now just for one more question. Do you suggest any specific homework or preparation or any other training that we as teachers need to be equipped before we deliver the curriculum?
No, I think the specific thing is to have a look at whatever platform, whatever software you are going to use during that lesson. So I mentioned about speaking to your learners, finding out what social media platforms they're using. If you are able to find that out at the end of lesson A for teaching in lesson B, have a look at that social media platform, have a look to see what sort of messages individuals, not your learners, but what people are using that platform for. Is there anything that you pick up from that that you think your learners could engage with because it seems like quite a creative environment, or are there things that concern you that perhaps you'd want to make your learners aware of so they can guard against? Okay, and similarly with the other technology, the video editing platforms, the sound recording platforms that you use, just have a quick walk through ahead of the lesson. But as I say, also be prepared and don't be shy to learn from your learners during the activities.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Lloyd. I think that is time. So apologies, we haven't managed to answer all of your questions, but thank you very much for sending those in. I hope the ones we had managed to answer have given you some further insight and assistance there. Lloyd, is there anything else you wanted to say in closing?
No, I think just with regard to questions, on the School Support Hub, there are forums on there, and what I'll do, if I can get hold of the questions, and we're not entirely sure if we can as yet, but if I can, I will post some answers to questions that I think are really relevant on the messaging forum on the School Support Hub. So well worth taking a look at the there are specific forums for primary digital literacy and for lower secondary digital literacy. So give me a week or so and keep having a look there.
Okay, great. Thank you again very much, Lloyd, for that session, and thank you everyone for joining us. We hope you found it beneficial and useful. And yeah, have a great rest of your day wherever you are.
Thank you very much, everybody.